Another Mets season has come to an end, and it is another year for the New York Mets where they do not make the playoffs. In this video, I'm going to briefly go over how the season went and just the main takeaways and the main reasons why the Mets missed out on the playoffs. I think the number one frustrating thing for me was that this team found multiple ways to lose games. I mean, it wasn't just one thing every single game. It was three reoccurring elements. It was either the Mets get runners on base and then have an inability to hit when those runners are in scoring position to drive them in. Number two, there were way too many games where the starting pitchers got bombed and they only went 2 innings, 3 innings, and the Mets are already out of the game within those first couple innings. Number three, once the Mets got a little bit of offense, the pitching got fair enough into the game, 5 innings, 6 innings, whatever it is, and then the bullpen blew it, which we have seen year after year after year after year. And the reason why that had not changed is because the New York Mets general manager did not do his job. He did not fix the bullpen, and the same problems happened for the Mets. The defense wasn't good. The manager made questionable decisions. There were not few bright spots for the Mets. I mean, there were a couple guys that you could say, okay, they had good years. Guys like Dom Smith, Conforto, both of them finished the season hurt. David Pearson, he had a good rookie year. DeGrom was really good again. Jeff McNeil was pretty good again. But there were plenty of other guys that you say, what the heck happened here? What kind of year was this from guys like Wilson Ramos, Pete Alonso, Steven Matz, Michael Wacha, these guys, Dylan Betances, Jerry's Familia. I mean, there are major question marks for a lot of players on this team. Ahmed Rosario is a prime candidate, and you could say, what the heck was going on with Rosario this year? What also drives you nuts is the fact that in this kind of a season, 60 games, a bunch of teams make the playoffs. More than half the league is going to make the postseason in the National League, and the Mets still found a way to not make the postseason. I mean, that is just, it shouldn't even be possible. And especially when you look at some of the guys in the lineup that had a 300 average or had almost a 400 on base percentage, still couldn't make it happen. And they were 3 games out of a playoff berth, just like the way they were last year. Games they needed to win, they lost. I mean, they just found so many different ways to really make this a total failure of a season. That's what it was. It was a complete failure. And it's just so aggravating and so frustrating. And one of the things that it really kind of bothers me is that a lot of Met fans are okay with the way this season went because they're like, oh, well, you know what? New ownership's coming in. Steve Cohen's going to take over. He's going to fix everything. And all of a sudden, the Mets are going to go for a team that was under 500 to they're going to be in the playoffs every year, maybe win a championship because Steve Cohen's going to make this much of a difference. I do imagine that the New York Mets will be better under Steve Cohen and Sandy Alderson back at the helm as president. Will he hire somebody else to be the actual GM of the team? Who will that be and how will they do? So that's 2 question marks right there. You also have the question mark, Cohen gets approved, whatever. How much money is he really going to spend? I do have that question because is Cohen going to sign every single free agent? Does every free agent want to come here? I'm not sure because the Mets, they just have this reputation of being some losers. The New York Mets are just a losing organization year after year after year. They give you one good year in 2015, one good year in 2006, and after that, you wait 10 years until the next playoff berth. That is the way it has been forever for the New York Mets. That is just how their whole organization has gone since it first started. What? You had the good year in 69, you win the championship. 86, you win a championship. Had a couple other good years in the 80s. You go to a World Series in 2000. 2006 team was pretty good. 2015. I mean, there are these huge gaps between their playoff berths and, being successful. Maybe also 73 against Oakland. So, I mean, you can't be like that. You have to be like some of these other teams that they have streaks of being in the playoffs every single year because the Yankees, they had plenty of injuries and things go wrong and starting pitchers not add up the way they were supposed to. But the Yankees still found a way into the playoffs. So it's just the same thing over and over with this New York Mets team. And I just can't go into this, idea that, boom, Steve Cohen just fixes everything. I'm not so sure about that because my thing is that, okay, let's say Steve Cohen comes in. I already have question marks about JT Realmuto. I know he came back at the very last few games of the season, had to play first base because his hip was bothering him. Realmuto finished the year with a 260 average. Are we going crazy about that? Does that get the Mets in the playoffs? No. His defense should and probably will be much better behind the plate than Wilson Ramos was. The Mets are still going to need another catcher after Realmuto because the backup catcher play from the Mets since Ramon Castro was here has just been brutal. I mean, all these different catchers that have been out there, none of them have been successful. I don't want to see Tomas Nido. I don't want to see Robinson Chirinos. I don't want to see Ali Sanchez. I don't want to see any of these guys. I want established major league players that actually put together competent major league at-bats and don't let wild pitches go around them and can actually tag runners out and can actually throw runners out on the base paths. Oh my gosh, asking so much to get competent catcher play. Another thing that has to happen, how are the Mets going to figure out center field? Because George Springer, he's now above 30, going into next year. So how long is he going to be out there in center field? And George Springer is a little streaky. We know he's good in the playoffs, but the Mets have to get there first. So I have question marks about George Springer too. Does Trevor Bauer want to come here? Maybe. So there's a lot that has to be answered because you know what? Stroman's going to be gone. Michael Wacha is going to be gone. Rick Porcello is going to be gone. You don't know what to do with Steven Matz after how horrible he was this year. And Noah Syndergaard's come back from Tommy John surgery. We don't know how he's going to be. So you have so many questions. And don't even get me started on the bullpen and how bad Dellin Betances was. And the same garbage in the pen. So I just have so many question marks from this team. I mean, that's a lot for Steve Cohen and Sandy Alderson to do. They have a lot of work to do because of how many ways the Mets lost games this season. I mean, the early part of the season, when they were facing the Braves and they were facing the Red Sox, the Mets would have games where they get 15 guys on, 13 guys on, 11 base runners, and they'd only get you 1 run, 2 runs, no runs. They would have games like that where they get 13 guys on and don't score a single run. I mean, just the inability to hit with runners on base. The Mets hit into more double plays than anybody. They struck out at an alarming rate. They chased pitches. They popped up. Again, they did everything possible. They made so many outs on the bases. They found every way possible to lose games. Every way possible. Is Luis Rojas the future manager? He didn't look amazing to me. I mean, it's hard to criticize him of such a weird season, but I think if you're a good manager, there's just so much underperforming. You know what I mean? The way these guys, either they were just so inconsistent. One day Porcello looks good, then he looks bad. Then Wacha had a couple good starts, looks horrible. You know what? Matz was inconsistent this year because in the early part of the season, his first few starts, he was okay. Then it became a disaster. Again, the offense, leaving guys on base. Then sometimes the bullpen, guys would have good guys, guys had bad outings. You know what? It just happened all across the board. It looked like Alonso might have a breakout game. Then he doesn't do anything for a week. Looks like Rosario's a breakout game. Doesn't do anything for a while. Same goes for Ramos. So the inconsistencies, I question a little bit that with the manager. I think the manager, it's their job to make sure these guys are doing what they're supposed to do, that they're being consistent and being the players that they're supposed to be. It's not Luis Rojas had a bunch of really bad players out there. That's not the case. With the talent that this Mets team had in this expanded playoffs, they should have been in the postseason. There is no doubt about it. That's why this season is a failure and it's a disappointment. And just so many Met fans just let this year slide, and I don't see why. I don't care it's a 60-game season. I don't want to hear any of that garbage. This team did not get the job done, and they really did not. So now we're just going to say that it's magically going to be better. And I've told you that all year long. I said this team is not magically going to become better. And I don't feel that way going forward. There is just so much work that needs to be done. I'm just so frustrated with the way this season all around went. Because then you would have, like I said, the games where you'd have the bullpen blowout. The games against the Braves, that Friday night, July 31st, where Porcello was on the mound, wasn't too good. Betances was awful, and Lugo didn't pitch well. Everybody was bad, and d'Arnaud gets that big hit, and the Mets lose that game after they had a huge lead finally. Another game that will always stick in my mind, the game against the Yankees, that doubleheader, that first game where they brought in Jared Hughes in the 9th inning, 7-2, and they lose that game 8-7. The day before that, when Dellin Betances is thrown into the backstop and can't throw a strike, the Mets lose that game, leave a ton of runners on base. The game against the Blue Jays where Robbie Ray left a ton of runners on base. A bunch of games where they got bombed. The Walker Lockett game that he had to start for Jacob deGrom. Luis Rojas pitched him too much. He messed it up. Wilson Ramos had a bad tag at home plate. The game that Ariel Jurado started against the Baltimore Orioles, he got bombed. The Mets lost. I mean, it was game after game. The game with Peterson against Zach Wheeler, where the Mets made a big comeback, and then the bullpen blew it by Familia, and then Castro blew it when you could have went to Diaz for 2 innings, but that would be smart. Why would we do that? I mean, and then another thing that really drove me crazy about this Mets season as the year progressed, as it got late in the season, Todd Frazier batted cleanup every single time the Mets faced a left-handed pitcher. You cannot be a playoff team if Todd Frazier is your cleanup hitter against lefties. And Luis Guillorme, who had a great year, was batting .400 until Todd Frazier came in and took his playing time, and Todd Frazier got to play all these games and was not good at all. He was the same Todd Frazier as before. A couple home runs here or there, but for the most part, low 200 averages with okay defense. That is what Todd Frazier is. He got thrown out on the bases again because the guy can't move, struck out. I mean, all that stuff. Can't hit with runners on base. It's just the same garbage over and over that we see from this Mets team. They lost so many prospects to get Billy Hamilton, who they then got rid of. I mean, they did the same thing. They traded a bunch of prospects to get Marisnik. He was hurt and inconsistent this year. I mean, they traded guys to get so many different pieces that it just did not work out, no matter who it was. This last weekend of the season, it's like, okay, well, you need a lot to go right. You need the Giants to lose, you need the Marlins to lose, you need the Phillies to lose, but most importantly, win your games. So how do the Mets close the season? They lose 3 in a row, and on the very last game of the season, they lose 15-5. Way to show some fight. Not really. I mean, this team didn't even show you fight. They didn't even show you a pulse. And all year, you had to hear lines with these guys, oh, we're going to turn around. This team is too talented. Oh, we're going to figure it out. They said that a million times, and they never were able to do it. They never were able to capitalize. They'd win a game, and then they'd lose a couple games in a row. There were very few times this season where the Mets would win back-to-back games. It was far too often that the Mets lost back-to-back games, and that just happened way too much. And whether they would get swept, they'd lose to the Marlins, or all the struggles they had against the Phillies, then they ended the season on a bad note against the Nationals, and the Mets tied for last place in the division. So again, it's just like there is so much work that needs to be done, and there are so many questions that have to be answered because the starting rotation, what are you going to do there? You have DeGrom, you have Peterson, probably Syndergaard. Then what is it after that? If you use Lugo, who is going to be in your bullpen? It's going to be Diaz and who? Because Wilson wasn't good this year. Brock was awful. Jared Hughes was awful. Familia was inconsistent. I don't want to see Miguel Castro anymore. You know, all these different pitchers that the Mets used. Chasen Shreve was probably the Mets' second best reliever this whole year. And even late in games during this last stretch of the season, Chasen Shreve wasn't good. So, I mean, did his magic run out? Ashramo Ramirez, he was pretty good. Then he got hurt. I want to say it has to get better, you know, going forward. But it is the Mets, so that doesn't necessarily make it a guarantee. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, leave a like, comment. What did you think about the way this season went for the New York Mets? What were your takeaways? I mean, like I said, there were some guys that had good years. You know, Dom and Conforto, some of those guys had really good years. But it ended up not mattering. DeGrom was good again. Not his best, but he was good. And it didn't matter. Diaz had a bounce-back year. Robbie Cano had a bounce-back year. And it still didn't matter because of all the different ways this team lost games. The next baseball video will be the Yankees and their playoff series against the Cleveland Indians. Looking forward to talking about that. Probably NBA Finals video once that wraps up. If you want to see football videos, let me know. The views on them weren't great at all, so I'm not sure if that's exactly what you guys do want to see. But I'll tell you what, real quick, I watched the Jets game yesterday, watched the Giants game yesterday, and I have never been more sick to my stomach after watching about two bad football games I think I've ever seen. I mean, you want to talk about finding different ways to lose. The Giants and Jets, they do everything wrong. I mean, they allow just countless mistakes, turnovers, penalties, everything you could do wrong, injuries. So it just has been, unless you're a Yankee fan or Islander fan, it has been brutal for all these New York teams. And it just really is really frustrating and sad to see that. The Mets season, it was only 2 months long and it's over. But until the next one, be safe, be smart, be healthy, and have a good one, everyone.